This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker once again. Looking forward to a fun hour of talking racing, not only with the usual co-host on this program, but also with special guest John Seabrook, who will be joining us. If you haven't read the John Seabrook piece about Jose and Irad Ortiz, I suggest that you do so before you listen to the final 20 minutes or so of today's show. We can do that thing where we pause and you go read it. We'll do it now. Wasn't that cool? I really love Seabrook. What a great writer. A real honor to have him on later in the show today. But before we get to him, I want to introduce my co-pilot on the DRF Players Podcast. He is calling in once again from the planet Texas. He is the People's Champion, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
God, I'm feeling a little underappreciated today, to be honest.
Second billing.
Producer Craig's my big fear. He's coming with horses to watch and show ideas. I could get run out of here before it's too long.
Well, hopefully you've reestablished yourself. The whiskey has yet to arrive, so I'm still going to make fun of you for that time a couple of weeks ago where you literally slept through the show. I think it's fair to say, having listened, if you're one of these people who's listened to all of the 289 shows to come before this one, this is show 290, by the way, December 5th, 2017 edition. There may have been some times where you slept through the show, JK, but then a couple of weeks ago, you literally slept through the show.
Look, it was a rough night. I apologize, and we'll try to keep it from happening again.
Well, we really should be talking about, to start off the show, and I can't believe I didn't have it on my show notes. The Fu Manchu bet went down. We'll get to the specifics of the race in a little bit, but I'll be honest, I have yet to carve my facial hair into a nice 1970s relief pitcher shape, but it will be happening soon. I actually have made an appointment, JK, with my stylist for tomorrow night.
Wow, you're gonna get it done right.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be proper. Bethany, who's been cutting my hair and occasionally making topiary out of my facial hair for more than a decade now. I followed her from where she started off in Soho to the tattoo parlor in Williamsburg, and now she operates out of the bike shop in Greenpoint. How Brooklyn is that?
You know what's funny is there's actually a place in Austin I drove by the other day that's like tattoo parlor and barber shop, and I was like, how does that, is that a thing? This is the first one I've ever seen. Maybe.
Well, it was the way they had it at Graceland, which is what it was called. Unfortunately, it's closed. Though maybe fortunately for Bethany, she seems a little more relaxed now that she's not like running a whole business. But it was just sort of like you walk in. It was like an old garage essentially. You walk in, there's a desk, and then there's just like it just branches off into two rooms. One where the left side, where the ink is happening, and then over on the right where the barber chairs were. But Bethany will be helping me. I will not be welching on my bet. I will reveal something to you though, JK. This was this bet with Sharp Azteca, really what it came down to. It wasn't so much something I wanted to do because of the strength of my opinion. I wanted to do it because it was actually a brilliant advantage play. And the person who pointed that out to me, and I'm not just referring to the fact that I was able to, lay a 3-2 shot at even money essentially, which is obviously, good value. But Mike Maloney figured this out at Keeneland before the very first Fu Manchu bet. I was sitting at his table and I asked him, I told him about the wager and said, that I had, I'm somehow spacing on the horses in question from the first bet, which is just a testament that I had too much.
Proctor's Ledge and Uni.
Proctor's Ledge. And so I asked him what he thought of the bet, expecting him to make a comment on who he thought was going to do better in the race, Proctor's Ledge or Uni. But instead he was like, no, he's like, man, you got him over a barrel. I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, you like Uni that much more? He was like, no, man, like if he wins, if you win, you get to see him in the Fu Manchu. And if he wins, you probably wanted to carve your face into the Fu Manchu anyway. And he was exactly right. I'm ready to make a little run here with the Fu Manchu for the holidays, JK. So that's why I'm doing it so seriously. I don't think this is going to be some 3-day nonsense like you did. I'm actually just going to wear the facial hairstyle. And I also wanted to point out, somebody on Twitter quite correctly pointed out that technically the facial hairstyle we're talking about is a horseshoe, not a Fu Manchu. The Fu Manchu technically is where you get the mustache piece of it, but then you like grow out the ends and like curve them down to your chin, sort of like picture the bad guy in a kung fu film. That's like the proper Fu Manchu, but I just like saying Fu Manchu so much more than horseshoe. I'm just going to go with that if it's okay with you.
Yeah, no, 100%. I actually sent a GIF. Me and Austin were trolling you on Saturday after the win. My son, he had the video with the Clippers, and I also used the GIF with a guy that had a little Fu Manchu action going. So we were rolling.
Excellent. All right. So I'll be making good on that promise tomorrow. We have not a short show. It's a regular length show, but in terms of the portion that's just you and me, not as long as usual today. So let's dive in to talking about some of these races. Let's just go back to Aqueduct on Saturday. And why don't we start off with the Gopher Wand? I don't think you can fully claim 12-1 winner Indulgent. Like, it wasn't like you gave her out straight on top, but I would certainly say for people playing contests or people playing multi-race wagers, a lot of what you said would have probably caused you to throw her in. What did you think of the performance, and were you able to make any good out of it for yourself?
I said 3 horses' names. I said Jameson and Ginger, Highway Star, and Indulgent. So I will claim a little. However, I told you after, I was so frustrated because playing in some contests, I used Jameson and Ginger, pick 5 ticket. I used Indulgent as a C. Here's the thing, right? And I'm not joking when I told you this story. I woke up like really early, like maybe 4 o'clock, and you're going to go back to bed. I woke up from a dream, and my dream was that it was Saturday morning. My dream was that the 1 horse got beat by the 7 horse in the stretch.
I think it was the 2. Wasn't it the 2 horse you said?
No, it was the 1 horse.
Okay.
The 7 beat the 1 horse in the stretch, and I woke up and I was like, "Oh, was that about Indulgent?" And then I went back to sleep. And then I didn't let the dream guide me. So,
like me with Sharp Azteca, we both dreamt about winners at Saratoga, at Aqueduct on Saturday, and somehow managed to not make money on either of them, which is impressive.
No, and one of the things that I've been doing, lately is been trying. We've been trying to learn both sides. I know you know a little bit more probably about the reading side than I do, but we're both interested in it, because our origination in this game didn't come from that side. And, with the Prince of Keeneland, Jake being involved in buying and selling horses, and our relationship with Craig Bernick, and then also with our buddy Scott Calder at Coolmore, I really started to appreciate when things like this happen, and the value just keeps going up for Indulgent out of Bernardini. It's a half to Frosted. You get a horse with that kind of pedigree winning stakes races, the register clinks every time you get one. So good for them.
Friend Scott Calder, that guy hates you, JK.
You're going to start another rumor.
Inside joke there, but fans of the show should get it. All right, let's move. I don't think there's too much else to add there, unless you had anything to watch or anything coming out of that race. I think it might just be worth moving things along and getting to one that we got spectacularly wrong. Wonder getting it done. I don't think I can pronounce Gal Gadot's name. I know it's not Godot. I know it's not Godot. It's something in the middle. I'm trying to get it right, and I think I just butchered it. But anyway, you know the horse I mean, and I think everybody's going to be learning to pronounce it if the performances like this continue. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to be so against a horse named after a woman that's so beautiful. But I was
a great actress too, a lot of charisma.
I wanted nothing to do with this horse and this spot. And in fact, another story. And luckily, he let me off the hook. I opened my mouth, but he let me off the hook. The Prince of Keeneland was in town visiting in Austin, and he has a lake. They have a lake house here, so he comes down quite often. I didn't know that he was like John Madden, and if you didn't know that either, he doesn't. He will fly, but he doesn't really like to fly, so he kind of drives everywhere. And so he's in town, and he texted me that morning, and he said, I like Wonder Godot and Sharp Azteca. I'm going to, make my plays around them. And I said, I absolutely hate Wonder Godot. Like, she can't win. She won't win. I said, if she wins, I will ride with you back to Lexington, and I'll drive the whole time. And so he texted me right after, and he said, are you going to be ready Monday morning at 8 o'clock? I'll have the car gassed up.
I take it you welched on this bet, but you have him a drive. I think he could take an IOU on it. Isn't that fair?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's totally fair. I mean, look, unfortunately, I heard she got hurt after the race. Did you know?
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I think we probably would have heard if it was something a little bit more catastrophic. I just think that it was a little bit of a situation that's going to see her sideline for a second. I'll Google it while you follow up.
Yeah, well, I'll just talk about the pace of the race. There's a very unusual array of numbers if you go ahead and look at the Timeform US numbers, where you had a weird sort of slowdown. So even though the coding in the race isn't blue on Timeform US, I do believe it's safe to say that the pace was disadvantageous to horses coming from far back. And with that in mind, I thought that Layla Noor, who was my on-top pick, who you had mentioned as well, ran huge and might be one to continue to take a look at for Arnaud Delacour and hopefully Manny Franco going forward. But what do you think? Who is the horse? It's hard to say that anybody but Wonder Godot is the one to take out of the race based on how strong the overall performance is. But obviously, things can change a lot when the year turns with these horses. Who do you like going forward?
I think it's tricky. You don't really learn anything about more power in this spot because, it was close enough to a slow pace. It doesn't really identify whether or not the horse will stretch out. It seems like she will. So I would think that she'd be one that I would consider moving forward. Daisy didn't really have much of an excuse. If she would have held on for second or something, I can understand kind of being caught in that jockey's dilemma with Kendrick, maybe not going fast enough with her, but then fading to fourth and having two other horses run by her, I think was kind of an indicator that maybe she doesn't want to go that far, or maybe she's not as good as you might have thought she was. 50 to the half, I don't care what was going on. They weren't going very fast. I want Layla Noor out of this one. She came from seventh, and I thought that was pretty impressive closing into the fractions that she did. I think that John Embrial even kind of yelled out the fractions as they turned for home, and 1:16. Like, I think that that pace definitely was slow, and you should upgrade horses coming from off the pace.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
I'm struggling to find the Wonder Godot story, so it was via text. So,
oh geez,
maybe
you have breaking news here on the DRF podcast. JK is going to get himself in trouble again. He's talking about purse money being withheld. He's reporting.
Maybe she didn't.
Been told to the press.
Yeah, maybe she didn't get hurt. I don't see it on Twitter.
Scratch that reverse it. We'll have producer Craig go and scrub all this talk out. No, we're not going to do anything.
Yeah. Well, but now that I've Googled Wonder Godot, I'm seeing a lot of Gal Godot. So whatever questions you ask me next, I'm probably not going to be listening.
I was close that picture right now. I need you focused for the rest of the 23 minutes I have you on the show for today, JK. So
we're gonna stick with she didn't get hurt, and I didn't see anything because I don't see anything about it. So maybe that was something else.
Hey, let me give you a little advice about these texts you receive about racing information, JK. Trust but verify. A lot of places in the world that advice could be heeded. Demoiselle was the race. 82 was the figure. 105, actually 103 took a little bit of a downgrade from the final to the performance rating on Timeform US. How about the other mile and an eighth race, JK? This one I will claim because it was the only horse I mentioned in terms of one to bet on in the race, and it was Catholic Boy, showing that in fact. Showing several things. Jonathan Thomas, a lot of people have been very praiseworthy of this performance, and it has been terrific. He did say in his post-race interview with Maggie Wolfendale that, in fact, what I had surmised, I had no inside info on that, but I had just surmised that this was a horse that had run on turf earlier in the career, primarily because those are the long races that are available, and that it was really distance that was going to be his friend. And we'll have to get Jonathan on the show here soon. He was a little laconic with Maggie. Perhaps we can draw him out a little bit, JK, when we get him to make his maiden voyage on the DRF Players podcast, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. 91 was the speed figure. I was impressed. What did you think of Catholic Boy?
Yeah, I thought he was good. I thought he ran really well. I thought, like I told you before, I got a little jockey crush on Manny Franco. I love when he does well. I think that we're gonna hear about two Puerto Rican kids, Jose and Irad, but I think that there's a third one that needs to be respected in that colony, and that would be Manny. So I'm glad to see him get on the Derby trail with a good one. And Vouch was the other horse that I was kind of looking at there. Ran well enough for Arnold Delacour. He showed up and hit the board in both of these 2-year-old stakes. So maybe those horses can move forward. And the interesting one, and I didn't like the horse at all, was the Chad Brown horse, Al-Khatam.
Yes,
is that right? Al-Khatam. He got bet, but that's the Chad effect, right? That happens. It always happens, it seems like, and I think it even happened with Practical Joke. It's the Chad effect, and I think that I heard Travis Stone mention it kind of first to me doing his morning line at Saratoga, that whatever he thought a Chad horse needed to be on the morning line, he usually had to add a point or two to that number, or subtract a point or two to the number, because he gets bet. And usually he doesn't let you down, to be honest, but he gets bet, and that's why he gets bet.
Well, I still don't mind the thing that I said the other day about, like, I am at the point with, like, turf, especially turf fillies, they'll all just get thrown in. But I do think, just from a strict value for money point of view, there are sometimes, and I thought this was a good example, where, you're okay to fade them. Not that the horse ran badly, but just on that, exactly like you were saying, value for money proposition. And I do think there's something funny about, like, something that historically would have been considered a negative, running a maiden in a stakes race with Chad, just because he'd had so much success doing it in the last couple of months. I almost feel like the market flocked to it, like, oh, this again, between Good Magic and the technical maiden significant form. Don't get me started. But do you agree with that? That, like, sometimes there's almost like this some weird little trend that the public will pick up on that made it, made the betting all the more intense.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it's a trainer like that, or a trainer like Baffert or Todd, when they make a confident move, when you see a move of confidence with a super trainer, then I think a lot of people latch onto that. So, I thought Catholic Boy was good though.
Let's return to him for a minute. We had a question come in if Catholic Boy had been impressive enough to wrest Kentucky Derby future favoritism away from the likes of Bolt Doro and Good Magic, and that sounds a little extreme.
Yeah, no, I'm not ready for that yet. I mean, this race hasn't. When was the last Derby winner to come out of this race? It's a tricky race because you're asking these 2-year-olds to run so far so early. It doesn't always pan out as the other horses start showing up. So. I can see him being in the top 4 choices definitely going into the Derby. I would imagine that a sports book out in Vegas would probably have him in the top 3 or 4 choices now after this race. But I don't see him eclipsing the other 2 yet, Bolt Doro and Good Magic.
I'm seeing him as one of a group of 6 right now looking at Odds Checker, who are listed at 25-1, which not too bad. If you to be honest, that's a appealing. It's not like I'm going to run and bet it. There's so much that can happen between now and then, but it's not crazy. I might have guessed in the way that these things seem to often be underpriced that you'd be looking at 20 or less there. Just a quick run through the top of the market: Bolt Doro and Good Magic available at 12s. Analyze at 16, Lionite 20, and then the grouping that includes Catholic Boy at 25. Enticed, McKinsey, Scrapper, Take Charge, Tap It, and U.S. Navy Flag. And then just behind them, 33 on Mendelssohn, 33 on Montauk. And I mention that because another runner for Robert LaPenta, boy, not a bad position to be in. That team LaPenta does a pretty good job, JK, for a smaller operation to be having 2 of the top 10 right now, according to odds for next year's Kentucky Derby.
When I ask this question, I'm really not sure what I really don't know the answer is. It sounds like I'm setting you up, but I don't know what the constant is in the LaPenta operation that saw him have success with Zito and then the transition away from Zito. But they buy good horses, and they usually have good horses.
And they're managed very well. I mean, it's I think it is a team. I think it is a team operation. Another, like Jonathan Thomas, like me, like Gabby Gaudet, another Saratoga Special alum. Definitely one of the people involved in that operation, John Panagot. Somebody else we should come on here at some point and pick his brain. I think he'd have a lot to share about racing and a real horse player and really astute handicapper as well. We'll keep that in mind for a future show for sure. Anything else on the Remsen? Comments on Avery Island or any of the rest before we move things along, Jonathan?
I need to watch it again, but I think Avery Island's race was a little bit weird, huh? I mean, it took back, and I need to watch it again, but I'll give Avery Island another shot moving forward. As a horse that needs to be reckoned with, but no excuse. He wasn't beating the winner on Saturday.
I mean, one thought that I had about the race in general was that I was hoping that we saw enough from the horses and the time was fast enough here that this won't be a situation like last year's Remsen where it takes a while before the form, starts to come around and be anything. Hopefully this is a case where some of these horses will train on a little bit more. What do you think the odds of that are?
Yeah, no, it feels like that's the case. What we saw Tocqueville last year, and Motown obviously took him a while to find his stride. I just think there's an interesting dynamic to it, and honestly, I think maybe it'd be a more of a horseman question than a handicapper's question of what it is about a horse that gets himself ready to run at 1.1 miles as a 2-year-old, and why that those horses struggle to transfer their form moving forward to the 1.25 mile Kentucky Derby, because it's you would think that it should work the other way, right? It's like, oh, they were a 2-year-old and they excelled at 1.1 1/8. Well, they're really going to excel while the other ones are trying to catch up and at 1.25 miles. So I think there's a lot to the dynamic of winning 1.1 1/8 race in the fall or winter of a 2-year-old season.
That's a really good point, and I wonder. Just hypothesizing, I agree with you that horsemen would be really interesting to talk to about this issue. It might have to do something with like the blend of speed and stamina, and just how important speed is in today's game, and that maybe historically it's that some of the horses who are, this is just a hypothesis and it's based on nothing other than a wild guess, but that the horses who are in the past who've been able to get that distance at this early in their career are maybe tilted more towards stamina. I don't know. Well, and then as the sort of more traditionally fast horses, as they develop, as they get older, anyway, it maybe they're more suited. But I mean, it's very hard to say. And some years it just turned out that it isn't that strong of a race, period.
It looks like the last winner was Thunder Gulch in '94, and then if you look through it, though, some of the winners, I mean, there's stake horses in here, right?
There's some terrific horses, yeah.
Yeah, Old Fashioned one to Honor and Serve or Analyze, who's shown up as a stallion. Honor Code. I mean, there's definitely horses in here that Bluegrass Cat won the race. Court Vision.
The Honor Code one was weird. Remember, that was a really funny finish, and then. That was form too that I think for a long time people weren't too sure about until Honor Code, just one of those horses that it's so patiently handled, and then sort of had that whole second act of his career. So it is interesting. It'll be fun to follow, and I'm optimistic that this is a year where we're going to see some horses coming out of this race and making some noise. Did you have any thoughts on? And I'm putting you on the spot here. I should have prepped you for this. I'll be honest, I usually go back and do a lot more chart work and tape work and looking at things before we come on the show to talk about potential biases that we might see. I wasn't even really following much along on Twitter with what the general chatter was. What is your take on whether or not there was a bias and what that bias might have been on Saturday at the big day?
No, I haven't done that work yet. I will say that the inside hasn't been great the entire meet. So
sure.
I would make that assumption moving forward. In fact, I don't think it was the bias that got me beat with Jameson and Ginger, but I'm a little bit annoyed at myself for using her, considering that's kind of been the case. So, and then it happened on Sunday too. I was playing and I played a horse that was on the rail that I thought was going to be loose. It just like stopped,
Interesting.
Like, yeah.
All right.
So
Well, I apologize to the listeners for not having an opinion on this yet, and I will promise you that by the time these horses start running back, we will have gone back and done a little bit more work and be able to share a little bit more of an intelligent opinion as opposed to this just sort of reaction type show we're doing today regarding these races at Aqueduct on Saturday, because it's obviously kind of a huge deal when we're evaluating these races. And speaking of races that we want to evaluate, unless you have anything else on that.
No, I've been waiting to get to this race all day. Jeez Louise.
So they crossed the wire, and I did pop on Twitter for that one. Sharp Azteca winning well. And the first thing I see is a text from Jonathan Kitchen. Any questions? What a jerk. What a jerk.
Oh, with love. Don't make me I don't want to be the heel. I don't want to be the heel.
Oh.
It was with love. And I even text you afterwards. I even text you later that day after Austin. We posted the video of my son with the clipper saying, "PTF, we can't hear you." I said,
that was brilliant.
I said, Pete, I know you didn't have a great day betting, so I hope you know. I'm just joking. I'm doing it for the podcast and for Twitter. And you were like, "No, not at all, not at all."
Yeah, I was offended because it was like, how thin-skinned do you think I am, chicken? Like, I know I got upset. I know I got a little upset on the Steve Bick show the other week talking about something that clearly, upset me. But you think I'm just sitting here like steaming all the time when we're making cracks? I mean, I think this is an open secret. We contest different things on the show, and all. We'll play an adversarial role because that's much more entertaining. But there's nothing behind it in terms of vitriol, as we've been accused on occasion. The poor guy at the Nexus Racing Club who said to you, what did he say to you? That was a funny story, actually.
Jeez, well, Pete sure does give you a hard time. And the other thing that's important to note while I'm banging on my chest about Sharp Azteca, I have to bang on my chest when I'm right. I'm like 3 for 28 and against and out of the gate. So. This was a winner though. Look at that. I'm coming back. I'm making a comeback. And
there you go. 8 to 5. Go make your fortune on Jonathan.
Oh, we hit the exacta. You better watch out, Mister.
That's true, and it wasn't a bad exacta either. Seriously though, Sharp Azteca, what did this performance tell us?
I mean, look, like we've talked about it before. I think that unfortunately, and maybe not unfortunately, maybe rightfully so, to be fair. Jorge Navarro gets a lot of flack, and I'm not one to. I don't have any evidence in front of me. I know what it looks like, and it doesn't look great. We've talked about that before. All of that aside, this is a really, really good horse. The horse has won in like 8 different jurisdictions, 8 different racetracks. I mean, run well in 8 different racetracks. He hasn't won it in all of them. He can go fast. And like I said, he's better going fast. Now, yes, you're right. You made a great point that's not how I drew it up, and that's not.
No, in fact, you said you were going to be mad at Castellano if you rated the horse. I mean, I believe is something essentially that you said on the show last time.
Yeah, I was going to be mad at Castellano if you rated the horse and they weren't going that fast. And that's my hindsight opinion. That's not what I said. That's not what I really meant. But that is what I'm changing my opinion to.
You're going to go with that.
I just need them to be running. I need him to be traveling along. And the fact that he did take back just shows me that he's even that much more brilliant of a horse than I originally thought that he was. I just think that and I should have said this last time and I forgot about it, but I've said it a few times on the show, is I'll never forget, and this is why I love watching interviews and all of those things. I'll never forget in Dubai, they interviewed Jorge Navarro and they asked him, do you think you'll be loose on the lead? And he's like, I don't want to be loose on the lead. This horse is better when he's in a fight and when he's running. Like,
that's interesting. I didn't know you'd had that
loose
in the trainer's mouth. That's interesting.
Yeah, he's not good loose. And so that's why when I knew there was pace in here, I knew they were going to run. And this is a perfect example. And I wish that they would show this video like in jockey school. It's like, if you have speed like that, you are affecting everyone else in the race if you make them run that fast. How good did Mind Your Biscuits run being that close to that fast pace?
Oh, he was terrific too. Yeah,
phenomenal down on the inside as well. So, I thought Sharp Azteca was brilliant. I'm extremely excited about the idea that he'll probably run in the Pegasus.
Yes.
I think that I can see people like Nick Tamaro and Travis Stone, who are notorious for identifying closers, are going to love the fact that thing's going to cook up a little bit. Not that Gunrunner can't rate, but my point is, I know we're 2 months early on this, but Gunrunner is going to run faster earlier and for longer than he ever has. Like off of, I know he ran fast in Del Mar. I think that was a little bit circumstantial. No one was really running at him, so it's going to be interesting for sure.
I'm going to ask you a question that I'm going to give you a second to look up. Pace figure wise, where did the early pace figures that Sharp Azteca ran on Saturday compare to how fast he'd been running in previous races? I'm just curious to get a little bit of data confirmation of what I also assume was correct, that he was going faster early, and it did, as you predicted, lead to a faster, better performance. Even if I am going to call BS a little bit about the rating thing, we're going to put a pin in your genius because of the rating thing. But I do think your essential point was right. I'm just curious if you can look at any data on that for me. But while you look that up, I'm just going to go through quickly the prices for the Pegasus, which are listed in the UK right now. Gunrunner, obviously the favorite, 5 to 6. You got West Coast and Collected listed in the betting at 8. You got Forever Unbridled 12, and they're in behind Sharp Azteca at 14. The next question after you tell me about the pace figures will be: do any of those numbers do anything for you?
I guess West Coast maybe. And I'm not really been a huge fan, but from a trip perspective, it feels like Sharp Azteca is going to go. Gunrunner is going to stay close to him, close enough. And Collected, I feel, will feel the brunt of that. If he couldn't run with Gunrunner and Del Mar, I don't see why he's going to really run with Sharp Azteca at Gulfstream. And then West Coast is going to kind of sit that same trip he sat in the Breeders' Cup with an opportunity to kind of finish, maybe at a mile and 8. That might be better for him. So at first glance, that one's interesting. And then to answer your question about the pace figures, he ran like 125, 126 in the last in the Cigar Mile. In the Breeders' Cup, he ran like 117s.
Big difference.
But he did run 126, 126 in the Kelso. So, I'm just talking about the first two numbers that show up in this time form figures. Back at Monmouth, 111, 118. And then one more in the Met Mile, he went 115 and 121. So, spared a little bit of gas, I guess, on that first one, but I don't think anyone was beating More Spirit that day.
But it's interesting just seeing the more consistent, faster pace figure. In his case, did lead to on the time form scale, 134, which is I don't know where that I got to imagine that was close to a top for him, if not a top.
Yeah, I think Gunrunner I'm pretty sure Gunrunner is like a 134 type of guy. Trying to find him.
Significant top for Sharp Azteca, scrolling back through the previous races. I forgot you can do that another cool thing about Timeform US, you can do that in the chart feature. And yeah, that's up from a 120, just reading back his last 5 figures, starting with Cigar, 134, 125, 128, 124, 124. So, I mean, I do think there's something to your point, and congratulations for sort of beating me out of the bet.
Well, you sort of need to get on your hipster bike and bike on over to the barbershop tattoo parlor and get that Fu Manchu cut in and get us the picture as quickly as possible.
Don't worry, the pictures will be up. I can picture, I have a feeling in the next few days you're going to see, a photo up there on Twitter. Maybe we can do a side by side. We'll see. All right, we are running out of time for your portion of the show. We still have John Seabrook coming up in a minute, but I do want, before you go, JK, to remind people about 2 things. Next Tuesday's show, we're going to do the Mike Maloney questions show. Whether you've read the book, whether you haven't read the book, feel free to ask questions of Mike, you can tweet them to us. You can send them to podcast@drf.com. Mike will be with us for the whole hour. We can pepper him with a few questions as well. On that same show, we're going to announce the winner of the book contest, the Betting with an Edge Mike Maloney book contest, which is for the person who writes our favorite review on iTunes. Go to iTunes. You can do it right on your phone. Put a review in for the podcast, and we will pick a winner there. Folks interested in purchasing a signed copy of Betting with an Edge by Mike Maloney, reach out to me on Twitter @LoomsBoldly, and we'll try to get you sorted out. You can also, of course, buy the book from the DRF store. Closing word, a closing thought, anything from you, JK, before we cut you loose?
Yes, I want to make sure I submit my question to Mike before, so I don't forget. So listeners and Craig and Pete, don't let me forget. I need Mike to explain the cookie.
Oh, that's a good one. The cookie.
We got to get the cookie.
Yes, I wanted to get the cookie into the book, and it ended up on the cutting room floor. But we won't reveal. We'll get to the cookie. We'll get to the cookie next Tuesday, when we have Mike and JK back. JK, have a great couple of days. I'll probably talk to you later, but at the latest, I will talk to you when you're back on the show on Friday.
Sounds good.
Okay, and now we're gonna go, Producer Craig, to my conversation from yesterday with John Seabrook of The New Yorker. And now I'd like to welcome to the DRF Players Podcast, John Seabrook. John's been a staff writer at The New Yorker since 1993. I first became aware of him not far after that with a publication of a book called Deeper, my 2-year odyssey in cyberspace, which was published back when I was at Simon & Schuster around that time. His latest book is The Song Machine Inside the Hit Factory. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
So this article you wrote in The New Yorker, which had the headline, Puerto Rico's Ortiz brothers light up horse racing. First of all, I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed it and what a warm response it's gotten throughout the sport of horse racing. Typically, you write about the intersection of creativity and commerce. Where did the idea for this story come from?
Actually, it came from a story meeting. We have story meetings every Tuesday afternoon, and a lot of different people get invited to them, not every meeting. And you're supposed to bring 3 ideas and present them, and then if David Remnick likes them, he kind of adds them to this master list. And so one of the staff members actually brought this idea in, and David liked it and put it on the master list. And then I was looking for an idea, and I saw it, and it kind of appealed to me. So that's how I heard about it.
What was the aspect of the story that appealed to you in the first order?
Well, 2 things, really. I mean, I grew up with horses, although not race horses, but show horses, hunters, jumpers, and then just sort of riding horses. And I've always been interested in horses, and so that was one thing. And then the sibling rivalry of the two, the idea that the two of them kind of compete 6 or 8 times a day, 6 days a week, and that's their life, and they're these, brothers that are so close, just sort of seemed like an interesting kind of dramatic scenario. So I think it was those 2 things that really drew me into it.
I like it, and I like the fact that you were writing a story about brothers, and it seemed like a pair of brothers in Joe and Sean Clancy were also your guides in some way,
right,
at least early in the process. How'd you meet up with those guys? They were my first bosses in racing.
I was lucky there, I think. I mean, so the whole reporting setup was sort of ideal because it was at Saratoga this summer. I actually was renting a house with my family in Lake George, and so I could go down there. It was on the east side of the lake. I could go down there. It took about an hour, and so I would go down in the mornings usually, and I was, just sort of seeing who I could meet. And Sean, I met, through somebody else. It was Price Bell, actually, the breeder guy from Kentucky who told me about Sean. And then I wanted to watch a race with somebody who was knowledgeable, because one of my, sort of tasks was to bring racing to life for readers who probably don't really know that much about racing. And And, so I wanted somebody, not me, but somebody who was sort of like a surrogate for me, who could kind of talk about a race while it was happening. And one of actually the great things about another great thing about reporting the story was all the races, being videoed, you can see them again and again. So the whole first part of the piece, which is really just, an ordinary race on an ordinary day, there was all this great detail that I could get from it, both from Sean and then just from watching the replays. So, but I didn't know that was exactly how I was going to go about doing the piece going in. I mean, I was actually thinking it would be better to have a big race like the Whitney or the Travers be the focus, but neither Ortiz brother won this year, and it didn't work out dramatically for my piece.
I thought that having it be a more quotidian race, for lack of a better word, actually added to the way that you captured the sort of day in, day out of horse racing, as opposed to those big days, which obviously are fewer and farther between. Always good to hear Price Bell get a call on the podcast with his connections at the Nakoma Bloodstock and Mill Ridge, friend of the podcast. Guy. Yeah, how do you know him?
Well, that was from Pat McKenna. Pat was extreme. There were a lot of people who really were very helpful. You can give a little shout out. I mean, Pat McKenna, who sort of handles more the TV side of NYRA, the press, was extremely helpful, and he actually introduced me to Price, and we went to the yearling sale, the Fastic Tipton yearling sale, the sort of the boutique sale that took place when I was at Saratoga. So that's where I met Price, and he showed me around, his little area there, and we watched some of the sales together. I should also say that Jimmy Riccio, Jose's agent, was also hugely helpful in terms of answering a bunch of questions, particularly when I would go down in the mornings, and he could take me around on the golf cart. And he spent a lot of time, and his dad too, Jim. It was fun hanging out with those guys. We had a Jersey kind of thing happening. I'm from South Jersey, and we have Eagles Giants thing happening there.
That's great. You've already answered half of the next question I was going to ask. But one of the things that was so impressive to me about the piece is that you're coming at this as an outsider, and you're immersing yourself in this very complex world, and you end up writing a piece that contains so much knowledge. I felt even insiders, speaking for myself, I learned things reading this piece. It's great.
That's good. Well, Pete, that's great to hear. I mean, that's kind of the job of the New Yorker writer. There are certain advantages to being an outsider, that you can see things fresh, but of course the disadvantage is that you don't know anything. So reporting, which is sort of almost a cult-like activity at the New Yorker, and really is the thing that goes back to the very beginning of the New Yorker. Is reporting is this tool that you can use to acquire that knowledge, and if you spend enough time and ask the right questions and find the right people, you can maybe overcome the disadvantages of being an outsider, and then you get hopefully the fresh perspective of being an outsider. So
here's a pure writing question for you. In this day and age where there's plenty of written content out there, but it tends, even for jobs that are paying you to write, you're looking at word counts of 700, 800. What advice would you have for a younger journalist looking to become steeped in the type of reporting that you're describing? Is there any way to learn it?
Well, reporting is not, I don't think it's that mysterious of an art. In fact, people go to journalism school, but I always feel that it's more for the connections to, editors and newspapers than for the actual skills of reporting. It's really just a question of shoe leather type, going out, asking questions, hanging around, not really knowing. I don't really keep a strong fixed idea of what I'm looking for in mind when I'm reporting. I just try to take as much in as I can. I use my phone a lot to record everything pretty much, and then I spent a lot of time transcribing, which is boring, but actually gets a lot of the facts into your head in a way that you can then sort of call them up when you're writing. So, I mean, I actually think that the art of it really is more in the organizing of the reporting into a story, really. That's where I feel like every time I go about it, I sort of have to learn how to do it again, and each one is different, but it's a real mystery and puzzle that has to be unraveled. And I think that if my advice to young writers would be, I mean, reporting, go out there and do as much reporting as you can, but it's really the make or break is really going to be how you put it together and whether you can sort of deliver it as a story, And, that was the thing about this piece is that, it's about horse racing, but, it's got this great sort of brother story, and then the Puerto Rican community, the support group that helped them was that was like the skeleton backbone that I could kind of follow and then build all the other stuff around, And so when I realized that I had that, it helped in terms of like organizing all the other stuff.
That leads perfectly to the next two questions I was going to ask you. The first one has to do with that sibling rivalry between the Ortiz brothers, which you do a great job of capturing in the piece. I was curious if there were any stories specifically about that rivalry aspect of the story that didn't make it into the final piece that you might be able to share with us today.
Well, one thing that I was always thinking about when I was reporting the piece and being an outsider, I wasn't really sure, but everybody plays up the competitive aspect of how they're like Cordero played that up in a big way. This piece this quote didn't really make it in, I think, but he said they're best friends until they get out on the racetrack, and then they're each other's worst enemies. that was Cordero's quote. But I sometimes wondered whether that whole sort of aspect was being played up because, the racing authorities don't really want people to feel like they're working together in any way. Like it would sort of really, if you were a gambler of a certain suspicious turn of mind, and the Ortiz brothers finish first and second all the time, does that suggest some kind of collusion between them? And so therefore there's a lot of stress placed on the fact that they are desperately competitive and they want to win, and I'm sure that's true, but it's interesting that they're also on the same team in a way, and that aspect of it, and also of course Jose is married to Taylor Rice. His mother, whose aunt is Linda Rice, and so there's a real sort of almost dynasty of jockeydom kind of forming, there, and I'm not sure if the sport's ever kind of seen anything like that before, and who knows how it's going to develop as the Ortiz brothers continue to grow and assert dominance. What will that do to every race that they compete in? Anyway, that whole area is something that I've found very interesting, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
It's an interesting thread, for sure. You mentioned Cordero, certainly one of the great characters in racing, Angel Cordero, of course, and it does seem like he plays a godfather role. Obviously, he has the jockeys for whom he is the agent, and Johnny Velasquez and Manny Franco, but it seems like he plays this godfather role for the contingent of jockeys from Puerto Rico. Did you deal with Angel much? That was a great quote. But did you have a lot of discussion with him for the piece?
No, he was around. Angel's always around, so I saw him a lot. And then finally, toward the end of my reporting, he agreed to let me talk to him for a half an hour or so. But I got a lot of stories. You could develop Angel Cordero as a character pretty well. He was a legend. There's just fierceness and aggressiveness is legendary, and people still talk about it. And one of many great characters that I got to meet while doing this piece, which was really actually very pleasurable And also I must say, Pito Rosa, the security guard at Naira, was also incredibly helpful in terms of telling me all about the grandfather who doesn't speak English. And this is the grandfather of Irad and Jose, who tried to make it as a jockey at Naira in the 80s and never made it, and lived in Brooklyn, and it was just the Puerto Rican community, and and also the fact, of course, that I was doing all this, and Puerto Rico was devastated by the hurricane. I found that part just very sort of poignant. I really like that part of the piece.
For sure. As an outsider again, what was an area of racing that impressed you, and what's an area where you think racing could maybe do a better job?
Well, I'm actually very impressed with the racing's kind of movement into the 21st century appdom. I was very impressed with all the tech side. The Naira app, the amount of information that was available, video as well as text, but very much video. It's kind of for a sport that's basically the first mass sport in America. It's among the more advanced technologically, I would say. If you compare it to other major sports. So I thought that was pretty neat and pretty cool. That was definitely a revelation to me. And in terms of like the parts that need sort of like, the television part. I mean, going to the track is so much better than watching it on TV, and it kind of made me realize how racing just doesn't really work that well on TV, just because there's so much time in between each race, and it's hard to really sort of capture the excitement of the track on the screen. And so, that was having not spent a lot of time at tracks and then going to the track for, every day for a couple of weeks. It struck me that there was a lot about the track that is very alluring and captivating that doesn't come through on the screen. And also all the focus on the ladies in the hats and the guys with the ties and, the champagne. I mean, there's so much more, to racing than that. And the whole, of course, world of the backside, and the exercise riders and the hot walkers and the hierarchy that they all occupy, which I really only had, limited time to get into in the piece. But it struck me that there's a lot more to racing that might actually be interesting to read about or watch on TV that you often don't see. And then I guess, and of course the other thing is, the animal, I'm not going to say cruelty because I don't call it cruelty, but horses being euthanized on the track, and even the use of the crop, the jockey's whip. I mean, when you look at it from a track perspective, you don't really notice it, but when you look at it from the New Yorker, when I was kind of, when the piece was being edited and fact-checked, and you're having people that know nothing about horse racing, and you realize that this is what their first thought is that, isn't this sport cruel to horses? And, I don't see that idea going away as the sort of millennial generation moves into, their 30s. It seems like there's going to be some struggles with that audience and bringing them to horse racing if it continues to be marketed the way it is. I'm not sure how you would change it, but anyway, I mean, obviously that's going to be a big area of concern too.
I think that's very insightful, and I think there is more that the sport can do. I think it's happening in limited ways, talking about potential retirement opportunities for horses. But yeah, I mean, whip rules, I don't think people realize, people in the sport don't realize what a turnoff the prolonged, the use of the whip in the way it's often used, where a horse, it's used indiscriminately at times. Horses aren't given a chance to respond. They don't understand. That's the way it's always been done. It's such an easy knee-jerk reaction. But it's kind of disgusting if you're a first-time animal lover at the racetrack watching a race live. Sounds like you're...
Well, there's a good point in the piece Stuart Jady makes, the president of the Jockeys Club, who says that, a lot of people grow up with animals as pets. They don't grow up with animals in sort of an agricultural setting the way people used to, or even the way I did. I mean, if you grow up with horses, you kind of you don't necessarily think of them the way you would think of your dog or your cat. But if you don't, and you see people hitting them like that, I think, you think that's cruel.
One more thing, and then I'll let you go. I've kept you longer than I said I would, and I appreciate your patience.
Yeah,
but the gambling aspect of the story, which is obviously touched on, but you didn't get a chance to delve all that deep into it because it was far enough away from your through line. How interesting would that be to write about it some other time? What did you think of the whole gambling culture?
I would actually love to do a whole gambling piece. And the reason that I didn't really get into it is because I felt like there wasn't going to be space to do both, and I didn't want to. And I was also going kind of a little bit against the grain to do a piece about horse racing and not get into the whole gambling aspect of it. But yeah, I think it would be. I mean, handicapping. I could see myself actually getting into handicapping because it's actually intellectually pretty stimulating and a great way to just really become a fan. So if there's a way to make, because gambling is not all that interesting in a lot of contexts for a lot of people. But gambling on horses, if you dedicate yourself to it, is actually sort of like it's like being a fantasy football team guy. You have to process a lot of information. So, and it'll be interesting to see these apps affect gambling and make it when they make it you can gamble without having to go into a casino or go to an OTB or something. So I mean in theory that could make the experience of gambling quite different and could bring a different kind of a gambler, the app-based approach to gambling, but whether it happens or not, I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of that depends on regulations and state laws, and I guess what's going on in New Jersey and about to come before the Supreme Court could be of interest.
Oh, yes. A lot of discussion as to whether that's going to be a good or bad thing for racing. But that's a whole can of worms, and I promised I wouldn't keep you too long. So we'll save that.
I like to write about it, though. So if you have any ideas, Pete, you can tell me when.
I love it.
Email me.
I love it. We'll continue our little correspondence. And now that you've showed your hand that you're interested in handicapping, I'll send you the most recent book I worked on with professional horse player Mike Maloney called Betting with an Edge. It's a memoir hybrid instructional. Who knows? Maybe you'll get a kick out of it.
That's cool. All right. Well, thanks.
Well, thank you so much, John Seabrook, for joining us on the show. The article in the most recent New Yorker is Puerto Rico's Ortiz brothers light up horse racing. I recommend folks follow John on Twitter as well. What is your handle?
This is JM Seabrook. JM as in Martin.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we'll be talking soon.
Thanks, Pete. See ya.
Bye-bye. All right. That was a lot of fun. Thanks again to John Seabrook for taking the time out to join us. Some errata from before. I started a thought that I never finished, and I also think I incorrectly identified the person who did the JT interview after Catholic Boys win. It was Gabby Gaudette who was down there, Maggie in the studio on Saturday. And the point I was making about all those people, JT, Gabby, John Panagot, me, Saratoga Special alumni. I'm not sure if I actually completed that thought before, but I'm a little discombobulated today. So forgive me. And thank you. Thank everybody for listening. Thanks to Jonathan Kinchin. Thanks to John Seabrook. Thanks to producer Craig and producer AJ for helping us out. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel. We'll be back on Friday. May you win all your photos.